talking about things that are relevant to that particular retailer is really important. Trying to get some insider knowledge, right? What is, for example, what is Waitrose's sort of agenda, business goals for the year, and trying to align what you're doing with those agendas, trying to tick their boxes because everyone has their, KPIs. So yeah, just being very targeted about what we're showing.
Anyone who's tried to make an authentic curry will know that it's time-consuming and can be tricky. Smashing away at spices with a pestle and mortar, toasting your cumin seeds but not burning them, marinating your protein for just long enough. So in 2012, Dr. Shelley Nuruzzaman, physics PhD turned financial analyst, decides to give us curry fans a helping hand. She's crafted unique curry kits to produce authentic meals in a fraction of the time. She was in her 40s when she started Bang Curry and left a successful career, swapping a decent salary for long days wrangling with recipes, coding her website and trying to convince supermarkets to stock her product. She's here today to talk about how she's built a 6-figure turnover business in 5 years, selling more than 75,000 kits. And for anyone out there interested in e-commerce, she'll be talking about becoming an Amazon bestseller and using social media to build her brand online. Shelley, hello and welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm really good. I'm really excited to talk about this business. I've had my mouth watering ever since I read about it. So you'll have to take us through how you dreamt up this wonderful brand.
Well, it really did come after motherhood, as many things do. After the children were born and, lots of time in the kitchen, whereas I didn't really spend that much time in the kitchen before that. All of a sudden I was thinking about what was going into their tummies and thinking about nutrition, whereas before I was out in restaurants and just whizzing together meals quite easily, and not taking that much care of it. But I was really thinking about what and how to make these beautiful dishes that my mum would make for us as children, and it evoked those childhood memories back again. And when growing up with my mum, who's an absolute amazing cook, she's such a perfectionist, and I used to follow her around the kitchen. And so after the children, it just brought back all those childhood memories and the times that I would watch my mum cook in the kitchen. And I used to come up with my own little hacks because I never understood what she did, because there were so many of them, over a dozen different ingredients that she would play around with. And so to satisfy my curiosity and to get me involved in the kitchen, because as a 9-10-year-old, you can pretty much make a bit of a mess, but she encouraged it. She didn't say no. She'd get a little bowl and then she would portion out all the different flavorings, well, the spices and the herbs, and she'd create that little spectrum for me to go and play with. And so that was kind of the memory that sparked the whole premise of Bang Curry and those teachings that Mum gave me. And I just thought, you know what, I can do something with this. It's just a range that was put together to help share and promote that curry making experience with other people.
You paint such an evocative picture. And in fact, I remember being a kid and always smelling chopped onions and garlic on my mum's fingers, because she spent a lot of time cooking. On the weekend, she worked full time, but on the weekends, and that was like the special time, smelling the tomatoes cooking in the kitchen. So I know exactly what you mean. But then it's quite a big jump from being, someone on a salary, and you were working as a quant at the time, so you were a financial analyst, to then sort of risking it all on an untried business. Perhaps you could talk me through your thought process when it came to actually taking the jump.
Right. I'm being a quant and being in that business. You are very kind of measured about risk and return. And it was part of my daily routine, and it threads through everything that I did as part of my role at the various jobs that I had as a quant analyst. And so risk and return is not, I'm not averse to it at all. It depends, as long as it's measured. When Bang came along, I understood. I've had lots of ideas before, but nothing jumped out of me with such instinct and such resolution that I had no doubts whatsoever. And I did some back of the envelope calculations. I did a gross profit, quick calculation. I thought, you know what, this is something that really, at the time, I felt it couldn't go wrong. There was a huge gap in the market. I saw an opportunity, and it was pretty much who's going to get there first. And so, yeah, I got busy very quickly. It was a no-brainer.
And how much did you have in the startup pot? What was the budget that you thought, right, I can get going with this?
Zero. It was pretty much zero, honestly. It was... I started very much organically, and it was all part of the weekly shop. I would experiment. My poor children and family had to eat curry pretty much more frequently than usual. So I incorporated it at first, I would say, for about a year, perfecting those recipes, understanding whether, there was an appetite for it. So I did do a decent amount of market research. And so when I started to raise finance for it, it was through cookery classes. And so that's when I got a bit of a pot. And so we call that bootstrapping, I guess. I don't know if you know the term, but it's you make something and then you reinvest it back in. And it was like that for a few years until we got our first contract with HelloFresh. And we were spotted after being in farmers' food markets for about 6 months. So it all started with the cookery classes, teaching people how to make some basic recipes that I've known along the way, who I've taught friends and family. The basics like a dal, a tarka dal, a biryani, a madras and bhajis. These are really well-known favorites that I've taught over and over and over again, and took them through the cookery classes to really market test whether they whether it's something worth pursuing. And yes, we turned it into a product, some basic products, went to markets, farmers markets locally. There was Chiswick, Barnes, some in Clapham. Did quite a few, actually. It was fun. It was really fun. And then we stopped when it stopped being fun, because it coincided with getting on shelf at Whole Foods Market just before pandemic. And until we got our contract with HelloFresh, which I'm so proud of, and it really is what launched the brand. We then went out to get a little bit of investment. It wasn't much. My mum pretty much loaned us £10,000 in order to scale up the operations. And I was able to buy a piece of machinery. And lucky for me, Mark's a manufacturing engineer. He's a whiz with mechanics and electronics and everything of that sort. So between us, we were able to hire an industrial unit out locally to us, which is in Acton. We took this machine, rewired it, because it was pretty industrial, and it's a big blender mixer machine. And that was the start of Bang, where we did some really big scale production. I have to say, since then, I mean, that was a long time ago. We don't produce anything ourselves anymore. We did it the hard way, but I think there's a real benefit from doing that, because you understand the ins and outs of production. So yeah, so our first injection was the 10K.
That sounds so exciting, though, buying this enormous machine and standing there in this sort of industrial space, staring at this enormous thing for grinding and mixing. How exciting that must have been, that moment, because that must have felt so real to you then, out of the kitchen and into this business space.
It was literally out of my home kitchen and in this stainless steel. Yes, it was pretty surreal, I have to admit. It was a real moment. And then seeing the recipes getting accolades on the HelloFresh website, having the head chef ring me and ask me for the next recipe, discuss ingredients. Yeah, it was good. It was a good time.
Did you have any idea you would go the recipe kit route in terms of, finding a partner to launch you in that way? Or was that just a happy accident? How did that conversation with HelloFresh come about?
I kind of sort it out. I could see a real analogy between what we were doing and what the idea of behind Bang was and what HelloFresh were doing out in the marketplace. So at the time, HelloFresh were pretty, they were quite big in the US, but in the UK, they just started out. And I think they're a bit of a franchise, aren't they? They're all over the world. But in the UK at the time, they weren't really that hot on curry. They didn't have many curry recipes, or they didn't have any. And so I stepped in and I was there. I think it was a bit of luck actually, because I just, obviously I know what I'm talking about when it comes to the curry recipes, and it kind of matched with their needs at the time. And so I gave them a really good solution to something to add to their repertoire. So I wouldn't say it was an accident, but it was one of many opportunities I pursued, and it came through.
That's amazing. You have to think sometimes quite laterally about routes to market. So it's great to hear your story of finding someone that's like almost a springboard into people's homes and their palates. It's so interesting. And then I'm interested to know, because you were a physics PhD, so what skills do you feel you've brought from, working in the lab at Imperial College? Is there an overlap, I suppose, when you're putting together spice kits? Because it is sort of like a science, right?
Physics is it's an incredible subject where it's all about problem solving. It's highly analytical, it's very creative. And that's something I didn't recognize before. And I really see a parallel between the techniques that I used in the lab, whether they're optics or, lenses, mirrors, light, all of those things. I guess I swapped out for spice ingredients and herbs and the tolerances behind each measurement, and getting to those trials and reducing trials from 200 to 50 rather than 200 to 120. It was an easier route to get there using the techniques that I've learned through science. And it was really surprising.
So traditionally, you've come full circle and you're disrupting tradition almost by coming all the way around 360.
Yeah, that's right, actually. If we think about the disruption that Bang is causing in its category, yeah, I'm really proud of that. I just wanted to blow away the conceptions of what people call curry now. And it sounds so minor, but actually I feel really passionate about it, because the cuisine itself and what I grew up with is not what you find in the shops. And it's not, I find it a little bit almost insulting to the consumer to give them something like this that is not flavoursome, it's not healthy, it's not involving the consumer in the whole cooking process. It's almost like this is... what we do is to help to involve that person in the enjoyment in the kitchen, and to evoke the pride and healthiness of this way of cooking, not to mention all the sustainability that goes along with our range.
Well, we'll come back to the sustainability, but I'm interested in what you're saying about giving people part of the experience of cooking and being involved in the process, because there is a magic, isn't there, when the spices kind of hit the pan and you get the aromas releasing, and it's almost like a heady moment where you're getting carried away with what you're about to eat. So it's like theatre, right?
It is. It's very much like theatre. And honestly, I will never tire of using Bang, at least on a 2-weekly basis, and every time think, yeah, this is good. This happened really quick, and it saved me so much effort. And yeah.
Can't say fairer than that. I wanted to hear more about your experiences studying physics. You said something really interesting there about being the only woman in the college. That seems like, being an outlier like that must have been quite challenging at times. Was it? Like, did that teach you to be quite resilient as a person? And have you been able to pull those, I suppose, characteristics that you built within the lab, pull them through into your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I think Imperial's well known in that when I was there, it was well known for being 99 point something % male, and I was the only female definitely in my sort of in the Blackett Lab, we called it, which is opposite the Royal Albert Hall. It's a very nice place to study. I didn't really focus on being the only female. I understood that I had to perform a lot better, or, you know, I was being scrutinized because I was female. But the way I coped with it was just to get on with it and let that be a you problem, if you like. And I just carried on and put, you know, and just did what I was there to do. If I focused on that too much, I think it would have detracted me from the enjoyment and the reason I was there, because you can't do a physics PhD for any other reason apart from your love of the subject. That's the only thing that will drive you through, because it's tough. You know, there's not really much financial reward. It's all about achievement and yeah, seeking what you're looking for.
And then when you did the pivot into becoming a business owner, a recipe maker, you were in your 40s. You've mentioned you'd had kids by that point. Did that feel like a lot of pressure to make it work? Because presumably, you know, you had financial responsibilities. It wasn't, you know, you're not a footloose, fancy-free 20-year-old with nothing to lose. And how did that, I guess, influence your journey? Was that pressure actually quite motivating so that you had to be successful?
Yeah, it was very, there was a lot of pressure involved because I'd come from such a, you know, high achieving background, I guess, in terms of the other fields I was involved with. And I was well aware of the opinions that maybe some people may have as what on earth is she doing? You know, what's that got to do with anything scientific or financial or quantitative? But again, I just carried on and did, because I knew I had something. So that belief obviously carried me through those hard times. And it was difficult because I didn't have a wage to rely on, a constant stream. And I couldn't ring up IT when I needed help. You know, it's all about solving everything yourself. You're a one-man band for quite some time. And yeah, it was difficult, but then the small wins along the way, that's what keeps you going.
And tell me about some of those small wins. So we talked about HelloFresh and how that parachuted you kind of into the big time. Well, into the small big time. And then what did you do next? How did you build on that momentum to keep growing the brand, winning new customers? What were the next wins on the list?
Well, it was all about getting the name out there, being seen, tying up with influence. Micro influencers is what we used quite heavily. Amazon was a big brand awareness winner for us. Now, I mentioned that we started pretty much the whole scaling of our online business through the pandemic. So we made a good choice by just coming out of retail and concentrating everything on online. So we decided to go online. We created our own website, which I clumsily developed in the first days. We fast evolved from there, but you know, it worked. It was fine, and we launched onto Amazon. We actually even launched into Amazon EU before we couldn't trade in EU anymore, and that's what really helped us. And we escalated our I guess our sales there mainly through reviews and making sure our customers came back and reviewed our products, because reviews are everything. And it's the social media that ties in. It's all like one big marketing loop, if you like. It all tells that story, and one piece doesn't work without the other. So it was fast learning how all those different channels work together. It's quite complicated, but once you get your head around it, I think online was where we really started to establish ourselves in the beginning.
And how did you get people to leave reviews? Because that's just like the silver bullet, isn't it? If you can get people to say that they're happy, because people are so happy to tell you when they're annoyed or when something hasn't met expectations, but to get them to take the time to say, this was great, that's hard. How did you do that?
Well, we took the effort of having direct contact. We'd have people that actually did the customer service. We automated the process of asking for reviews in a clever way, but not in a illegal way, because Amazon's got some quite stringent rules. And we were it was time consuming, but worth it, because even just the one review makes such a big difference on the stats. And we made sure we looked at customer feedback. So all of those things really impacted the future sort of NPD of our products. So we listened, and I think we need to listen to make sure we continually improve what we're giving. So that's how we did it.
And how did you react to feedback? Because in the world of curry, I can imagine you've got this spectrum of people when it comes to spice. Some say, tiny bit is too much, and some are like, blow my head off. How on earth do you cater to all of those people at once?
You know what? That's a great question, actually, because I think I developed my resilience to it all when I was on the market stall right at the beginning, because I'd have people say to me, oh, it's too spicy. And I didn't understand, because spicy isn't in my vocabulary. I was thinking, what does that mean? Too spicy as in, but it literally means heat. And I wasn't aware of that. So I got accustomed to different ways of describing the flavors. And because we have quite a big range that caters for every taste, if you like, I was always able to direct somebody to a different flavor. And you know what? Every flavor is not for everyone. And I soon learned to not get offended. Obviously, it's very personal to me because I've developed them all from scratch. But, you just have to, you can't make everyone happy. But I'm happy to say that most people are really delighted when they use what we're doing. And if they're not, then I really try and dissect how they use the product, because there may be something not quite right in how we're communicating the use of them. So yeah, I'm quite stringent about those things.
And how do you get people to buy again and again? Because it seems like when you create a kit like this, you want it to be on the rotation, like when you're doing your meal prep, as you say, maybe every couple of weeks, there it is, bang curry on the rotation. So how do you stay in people's minds, just refresh them, remember we're here, we're tasty. How do you do that? How do you get repeat purchases?
So we try to give inspiration. So we want bang to be a way of life, not just a product that you use and get bored with. It's the versatility that we're giving people, and the empowerment to do what they want to do with their meals. And, if you've got dietary requirements, if you've got, ingredient preferences, you don't like meat, or you just love vegan type ingredients, there's always something for that person. And we want to inspire them with lots of different recipes that they can use with just the one kit. You can vary it up, but you've got your flavor locked in. And I think that's why people come back, because they don't get bored. They'll buy it once and they know they can change it up a bit, and it will go down well when they take that effort to put some time into it and make it.
And is that through social media? Are you sharing sort of, hey, look, you can use this kit for kind of exciting barbecue dish, or have you tried using paneer? Or how do you show them another way to use it, and how do you keep refreshing that? Is it like TikTok videos? How are you doing it?
We're doing it pretty much through social media. That's very instant, and sharing recipes. We've got recipes on our website, and now we're with Waitrose. They also showcase they're starting to, because it's early days, but on the horizon, we've got some lovely recipes that are going to appear in their weekend magazines. And it's through those platforms that we like to keep on refreshing those recipes, and because that's what it's about, right? Everyone gets bored with the same old weekday meals, or even if someone's coming round, how do I knock something together quickly and everyone's happy? And this is, we like to solve that problem and make meal times exciting.
And tell me about what the competitor landscape looks like now, because you were obviously doing something at the beginning of what became quite a big wave of recipe kits and different kinds of kits focusing on different kinds of cuisines. And there's now quite a lot of curry kits out there. How do you stand out? And has that brought more awareness to the category as a whole? Is that a good thing, or has it sort of stolen some of your customers?
The way I see it is that, I would rather not be the only product in a category and be carving that out, because frankly, we have been carving that category out, and it's hard. It's difficult when you're having to convince buyer after buyer that, you have a consumer group out there that are crying out for this type of product. So I'm actually really pleased because it proves our point that there's a demand for it, and actually competition's good, I feel, and we're quietly confident with our range, and that we can stand up to it.
Yeah, you don't want to waste too much time looking at the competition. You want to just be focusing on the next thing. And tell me about that. Like, how frequently do you bring out new products? Is there a lot of pressure to have this sort of pipeline of NPD constantly going?
That is the most exciting part. Honestly, it's just what I live for. NPD and the next thing, and, coming up with new ideas and making them just come to life. In the beginning, literally it took 18 months for that first recipe to come, to be perfect. Now, using all of those scientific techniques I talked about, I've got a methodology, and that last NPD I put together took me maybe 4 goes. I was so happy, and it was just amazing, right? And now we're seeing it in a new professional range. So what we're focusing on now is we've got a new range that has come out, which we launched together with some help with a non-exec director that we employed last year. Now, he comes from a really rich background of food service, and he helped a company called Santa Maria. I don't know if you know them, but they're really big in the Mexican spice space. Now, he helped us as a company to reformulate what we've done really well in retail and apply it to the catering industry. And so we've got this bulk range we've called Bang Curry Professional, and that is so exciting. I've got some really exciting news I can't share with you today, but we've got some that's pretty much our next launch. And that to me is so exciting, because that's feeding literally the masses. We're changing some really big things out there in terms of curry.
And are you still the one formulating the recipes? You mentioned there the methodology and it taking 4 goes to get it right. But is it still you sort of there with your hat on, your goggles on, mixing up all the spices?
I wouldn't pass that to anyone, because that's where I find the most joy. No, that's me. And it might not be me in a year's time, but at the moment, yeah, that's all down to me.
You got to do what you love. It's really sad when you interview people who start businesses, and the thing they love doing at the beginning, 5 years on, they're like, yeah, I can't do that anymore. I've got to delegate that to someone else. Nice to hang on to the bits that you love.
Yes.
You mentioned at the beginning, Shelley, about bootstrapping, and we talk about bootstrapping quite a bit on this show. And I'd love to hear some of the really clever bootstrapping strategies that worked for you and your business. So the ways, I guess, that you grew while still cutting costs, saving money, being clever about how you spent on marketing or go to market. So tell me about some of those strategies, 1 or 2 that really worked.
The first one I would say that I felt was really gave us a lot of return was the cookery classes that we did. it's quite a lot of effort on our part, but we got so much out of it in terms of, we've charged for seats, and I literally did it in our own kitchen. So there was no rent involved. So everything went straight into profit. Ingredients don't really cost very much. And we were ranking at #1 on Google for Indian cooking lessons. And that was pretty much, I don't know how I did it, I have to admit, but I built the website and I ranked us up there, and it was really quite low cost to the company in order to do that. And I think we got some really nice wins out of that, and obviously some reviews as well on Google about Bang Curry and the lessons, and the intellectual property we took out of that as well is what people actually wanted out of a product, and what sort of recipes, and how much time were they prepared to take with this. Because I was showing them step by step. I wasn't using the kits, and I was showing them from A to Z every single piece that would go into the recipe, but there was not one customer that didn't go away, take the recipe that I would give them as cards, but they all ended up just using the kits. So at the end, I'd give them a little gift bag with the kits and the recipes, but I don't know anyone that actually cooked the whole thing from scratch, went out and bought all the different ingredients. And so that was, there was a lot of learning gained from that. And it helped kickstart, it helped finance things like branding, things like print packaging, all of these things, all to do with cost of goods, which at the beginning, that's all we were paying for. Any marketing, we tried to be very clever about it in terms of guerrilla marketing or digital advertising, which basically I tried to turn my head to and did those, all of that stuff initially myself. I basically worked that bit out. Yeah.
That's a great tip, the bootstrapping tip. And what about when it came to getting your products on Waitrose shelves? How did you manage that?
Oh, hard work and perseverance. Knocking on the door. Oh, that was very difficult. I think that was a conversation probably that started 18 months prior. These things take a lot of time and nurturing, and using things like LinkedIn and social media just to stay forefront of mind. Talking about things that are relevant to that particular retailer is really important. Trying to get some insider knowledge, right? What is, for example, what is Waitrose's sort of agenda, business goals for the year, and trying to align what you're doing with those agendas, trying to tick their boxes, because everyone has their, KPIs. So yeah, it's just being very targeted about what we're showing out there online.
I wanted to ask about margin, because it's so difficult, I think, when you're doing a recipe kit to make sure that you're charging enough to have a sustainable business, but also like fit in that sweet spot where the consumer feels like they're getting value for money. How did you find that price point, and how long did it take you to get there?
So with Bang, we've actually always pretty much had that perception to value difficulty, and giving the consumer that value for money, especially with the, it's difficult now. Everyone wants value for money. It's, everyone's tightening their purse strings. And what we tried to do was to not over make our products a premium product. It's more about catering to like that middle section who have a little bit to spend on their grocery, but not particularly, it's not a premium product basically. So we priced it such that per portion for a 4-person meal, it's cheaper actually to use what we're doing than buy a jar sauce. And without a doubt, that's it's worked out that way. So that's how we did it. We compared ourselves with, all right, so how much would it cost to feed a family of 4 if you use a well-known jar sauce, or if you use Bang? And we pitched ourselves lower in price because we figured, well, actually, there's a price involved to actually do the cooking, right? So we allocated a certain amount of value for that. And then we equated it out, and that's how we came to the price, the RRP, if you like.
That's great advice, actually. Just thinking about the category you're disrupting and making sure that you're on a par or cheaper than the sort of traditional, like, lower quality option. I think that's amazing that you did that. And then tell me about Brick Lane, because when I saw that you grew up around Brick Lane and were eating out in those restaurants, like I was a teenager growing up in London, spending my 20s in London. All my friends and I had favourite restaurants on Brick Lane, and we would be going out to 93 Feet East. It's just brought back so many memories. So tell me about your life eating and kind of hanging out around Brick Lane and how that inspired your passion for food.
Brick Lane was a hub of the Bangladeshi community at the time. And, you know, culturally, food was everything. That's all anyone ever talked about. And, you know, food, what are you having for dinner? What are you having for, you know, what are you making for so-and-so when they come round? And we were in and out of restaurants all along Brick Lane. So Dad basically knew every restaurateur there. He just, I don't know how he does it, but he makes friends with everyone. And my dad had a factory in Brick Lane. It was a tea blending factory, and it was just off Brick Lane. And so I spent most of my days there around that area. And Mum also did a lot of cooking, as I mentioned before. So it was all about pretty much food and understanding which restaurants to go to, you know, which ones were, you know, gave the best naans, made the best homemade naans and parathas and all of that stuff. Now, it was fantastic. It was really good. And most of it was, you know, I didn't have to pay for it. Everyone was uncle in Brick Lane.
Was that like an early focus group? Because you must have seen like what were the most popular dishes in a lot of these places, the things. I mean, everyone always asks for the chicken tikka masala, always the forever chicken tikka masala.
It's a good one though, right?
It is so delicious. Hard to beat it.
It's the biryani. It's the tanginess in the tikka, I think. But it's not even a traditional dish. You know that. That's purely British. So British that was, proud to say that, actually. It's a very good sort of mix of the two cultures.
And we talked a little bit about sustainability earlier, and I really just wanted to come back to that because you've been very careful on how you formulated your kits so that they are kinder to the planet than rivals and other options that you could choose for your dinner. Tell me about that and how difficult it was to engineer a sustainable brand.
Cost-wise, it was difficult because our packs, they're all made of paper, they're all hand-packed, and we try to minimize the plastic. Now, we could quite easily have machine packed everything using plastic pouches. And there are new materials coming on board, so maybe we will go that way. But at the time of when we brought the range out, this was the best option for us. But more than anything, I think the sustainability comes across with the fact that you're using real ingredients. And they're not, you know, there are no additives, and you're using scratch cooking, meaning, or home cooking, whichever way you want to put it. Obviously, you're utilizing your ingredients in a more efficient way. There's less wastage. You're eating your leftovers. You might not necessarily do that if you have takeaways or jar sauces, because not necessarily nice the next day. But with this, it just keeps on going, you know, and you eat every part of it. And that's, I think, where we are teaching a little bit more about that sustainability aspect.
And was that really useful when it came to winning retailers? Because they've all got their ESG agendas now. Everyone wants to ask their suppliers, you know, what are you doing in terms of carbon reduction? And you're right up there saying, hey, look, no plastic.
Yeah, I would say topmost for the retailers, if I'm, you know, for us was the authenticity. And they really attracted to how authentic our flavors were and how they're put together, the authenticity of the processes. We didn't cut corners. We've just used some really clever hacks with what we do. And one of the components of our kits is it sounds so unsexy. It's a onion, garlic and ginger mix. And we've currently got a patent pending on it. And that was my latest MPD. And that, what it does, it cuts out all the hard work of the chopping of the onions, the ginger and garlic. Every curry starts with that famous trio. And so what it's doing, it's just helping make something that home cooking takes time and it takes effort, but it is more authentic. And I think that's what the retailers really loved about what we're doing. We're pairing up the convenience and the authenticity. And to top it off, it's the fact that we minimize our plastic. I think it went in that order.
It sounds like you've got more than one business here. It sounds like you've got Bang Curry, and then you've got this amazing ginger, garlic and onion product, which you could sell that mix to loads of other companies and loads of people in catering. And then it also seems like you've got this R&D process where you can get a new product created in very few steps following a particular process that you have also designed, which seems like an entirely other business that you could sell.
Thank you. That sounds you've made that sound really shiny. Thank you. I wish I had an onion, garlic and ginger thing to show you, but there's not one here. But the pouches I can show you.
Yeah, show me the pouches.
This is new. This is new to market. And this serves 140 portions. And this is the exciting new news that we will have very soon. I've got a really good listing, but I'm not allowed to publicize it just yet. So this is for, it's the chefs, right? It makes their lives so easy. They don't have to store all the different bags. And most of them do come in really heavy plastic tubs, and that's the sustainability aspect is really big on that side of the business. I would say more so than for retail.
Shelley, it feels like you're right at the beginning of this incredibly exciting journey, and I imagine that you're going to totally take over the world with this. So it's so lovely to be getting in the lift with you on the ground floor, and I hope that you'll stay in touch as you go bing, 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 bing up the skyscraper. Thank you so much for making the time to join us today.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning into this tasty episode. Hope we've got your taste buds tingling and your mind racing. Let us know what you thought by hitting the socials with the hashtag SoundAdvicePodcast. And don't forget to visit sage.com/podcast for all the show notes and other resources. See you soon for more Sound Advice.